Need some Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One cards? Well, you can snag them from our sponsor, Card Kingdom, over at cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish. Hello, everyone. It's Seth, probably better known as SAFEHOUSE, and we have a super fun video today. Today, I'm joined by Crim, probably better known as the Asian Avenger. Crim, how are you today?
Yo, how you doing? I'm excited.
Me too, because we are counting down the top 10 Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One cards for Pioneer and also Explorer. We've reached the point where Explorer is close enough to Pioneer that we're just going to do them together. It's gonna be there pretty soon. So we're going to be talking about the top 10 cards from the new set for Pioneer and Explorer. Before we jump into our list, one quick reminder, the way we do this is Crim and I each make a top 10 list and we kind of mash it together for the video. If you want to see our individual lists, you should head over to the article on the site. I'll link it in the description. You can go check it out. But anyway, let's count down our top 10 Phyrexia cards for Pioneer/Explorer. And coming in at number 10 on our list, we cheated a little bit. We have two very similar cards in different colors, Phyrexian Obliterator and Phyrexian Vindicator. I think Crim had Obliterator on his list. I had Vindicator on my list. They're kind of doing similar things, I think. Obliterator, obviously a reprint, but new to Pioneer, so it qualifies for our list. Crim, what do you imagine Obliterator doing in the Pioneer and Explorer formats?
So, since they've clearly decided, or at least at the time of this filming, they aren't going to ban Nykthos anytime soon.
Doesn't look like it.
Mono Black Devotion. I've been playing it for fun in Pioneer or Explorer, right? Either or. And this is just quad black pips. Like, this into a Gary is very painful and very good with Nykthos. And both the Pioneer and Explorer have red deck.
Ooh.
Red deck is popular there. Aggressive decks are running rampant there. Even more so in the best of one queues. So Obliterator is going to be a very solid defensive card. They have red decks have zero ways. Back when this was in standard and it was in, I played it in my mono black deck against red deck, and back then they had no way of dealing with it either. So this is just going to stonewall them, and it reads unblockable for most creature matchups.
Yeah, and hilariously, the same exact thing is essentially true of Phyrexian Vindicator. The reason that I'm hyped for it in the format is it's got 4 pips, so it's really good in mono white devotion, and red decks are really popular, and this doesn't quite host red decks as hard as Obliterator, but it still basically wrecks red decks. If you play this, they can't really kill it, they can't attack into it. If they do, you're going to shoot down their stuff or shoot down their face. So even though these cards are in 2 very different colors, they serve very similar purposes and do very similar things. I'm definitely excited for both of them, because as much as I think they should ban Nykthos, I guess, I think they should ban Karn. If they're not going to ban Karn, then ban Nykthos. I'm so sick of mono green devotion. But as much as I hate mono green devotion, I have had a ton of fun playing mono black and mono white and some of the lesser devotion colors, and these cards have me even more hyped to mess around with those. Why Nykthos still exists in these formats. I mean,
this also beats Obliterator.
It does. The damage is prevented.
It does. Wow.
Yep. Stonewalled.
Wait, hold on. Prevent damage to prevent that damage.
Oh, no, that...
No,
it actually doesn't work.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
it worked the other way. I thought it was hold on. Does it not do the damage to it? Oh, okay, cool. Well, whatever. Point is, this is really cool. I do think that mono white devotion, at least when I speak to Explorer side of things, and I'm pretty sure in Pioneer as well, there's nothing really good to do with mono white devotion, but this adds quad pips, and that's always going to be cool. And that's why these are here. They're just, I don't know. This is kind of an inner Timmy thing for me too. These cards are just,
they're cool.
They may not do anything at all. They're just cool.
They're just cool cards. They got cool abilities. You can do janky fight your thing with Obliterator, make you sack your board, or stuffy doll, damage my Phyrexian Vindicator a ton with a Blasphemous Act and he for a ton. There's cool synergies. They're big. They're flashy. They have, I don't even know what his arm is doing. What is up with that arm? That
arm. I mean, Obliterator is, I don't know, flaying flesh or something like that. But
Vindicator,
but that arm, Vindicator is just. That looks like, have you ever gone to a crab boil?
Yeah. Yes.
It looks like what you're trying to get the crab.
He's trying to open a crab. Yeah.
Yeah. So the lore behind this, because I'm very much so lore heavy. That's a lie. Ella Schnorren just really loves crab boils and wanted someone to just Get it done. Get it done.
Phyrexia and Vindicator. Perfect for boiling your crabs. Well, let's move on. Number 9 on our list. We got a card that I'm actually intrigued by. I had this as one of the weaker rares in the set, but Crim, I know it was on your list, and that's VRAAN Executioner THANE. It's a 2-mana 2/2 double Blood Artist effect. When one of your creatures die, you double drain, but you can only do it once each turn. What are you imagining with this one, Crim? Does the once per turn restriction not actually kill this card? Is there something we can do with it, even with that restriction?
So let's just say once per turn, right? But because it is 2 life in both directions, right? Up for us and down for the opponent, that's like 2 activations.
Okay.
Of like, let's just say an oven, right?
Yep.
So in a turn cycle, if I have 2 ovens, I'm now doing 4 damage, right? So think of it that way. So I sack one thing here on my turn. All right, you lose 2, I gain 2. Do it again on your turn. We're now looking at 4 life. So really, you're shortcutting all of it. It's less clicks on Arena, and like
sold. You have sold me. Yes,
yeah,
less clicks sounds wonderful.
For all the oven players, they're like, oh my god, he's right. It is legitimately though just speeding up the clock because you're getting the same amount of damage in the same, but just in a quicker amount of time. So I just don't see why you wouldn't want this. It seems really good. Like once a turn, sure. Maybe there's a way where like you can sack it numerous times and you go above. Like if you can make the health swing more than 4 in between a turn cycle, then sure. But like still, this is good even in that because then you have the cat coming back. You have all the other like aristocratic things. Like there are still other like ping effects on top of it. But this has to be one of the more powerful. I think this is way more powerful than we're giving it credit for.
Okay, I think you've partly convinced me. So I can definitely see the synergies in the cat oven deck in specific. In the like Rakdos sack, Jund sack deck, you have a good point that you can do it once on your turn, once during your opponent's turn. That's kind of 4 Blood Artist triggers because each is hitting for 2. So I can see that. I don't know exactly what you cut to make room for it, but I do think this has a chance, probably, definitely not as like a 4 of because it's legendary, but I could see playing a copy or maybe 2 copies in Rakdos Sacrifice. So maybe worst rare in the set is a little bit too harsh. I do think like it is. I don't know. It is legendary, and this is one of the cards I think we get so many legends these days. With some cards, it doesn't really matter for constructed formats. This is one of the cards where being legendary, I think, really does hurt quite a bit.
Yeah, like it being legendary, but like if this wasn't legendary, that's like if you had 2 of these, that's 4 every time you get it, right? Like that's absurd,
best
right?
Cat ever, yeah.
Like that cat is now 5 damage with 2 of these. I think like this is, and legendary probably isn't going to take off unless there's a Rada Drobic deck, like there is in standard, because there you have that and you have like Elias or Ellie, the other Orzhov.
Yeah, then it's kind of an upside actually, in that context, being legendary.
Yeah, so like outside of that though, I mean there are a lot of still good ping effects and drain effects. This is just like think of it as a lord effect. This is your drain lord, right? Like it's kind of doing just all the things that you were going to do anyways, but with at a much faster rate. So I kind of like that. It's less clicks, less time. You still get the same amount of damage over the course of like 2 turns anyways. So just solid. I like it. And it's a good body. It's a 2/2 as opposed to all the other pingers. I can actually attack you.
Blood Artists are a lot of times like 0/1s or whatever. So you actually, Grizzly Bear Body is actually like a pretty big upgrade for a Blood Artist style effect. So all right, maybe this
Drain
card,
Lord.
It's a Drain Lord. It's got something going for it. I'll give it that. Well, let's move on. Number 8 on our list. We have a card that I'm really kind of high on for Pioneer. This is another card that I really wish wasn't legendary. Being legendary kind of hurts it and probably makes it like a 1 of or a 2 of rather than a 4 of. But that is MIGLOZ Maze Crusher. So this is just another above the curve creature. It's a 3-mana Gruul 4/4. So that's pretty good stats. Even in 2023, that's a bit above the curve. It gets a bunch of oil counters, which isn't relevant for what we're going to be talking about in Pioneer. It's got a bunch of abilities. You can remove oil counters to give it Vigilance and Menace or pump it. Most importantly, you can pay 3 and remove 3 to blow up an artifact or enchantment. That's the ability that has me really intrigued by this card. So what I'm picturing is this shows up in the Gruul Vehicle deck, which has become a pretty popular deck recently, where you're trying to play your Land of Werewolves into above the curve 3-drops, into Sky Sovereign, Azeka's Chariot. I think MIGLOZ does exactly what you want in that deck. It crews all your stuff, it comes down on turn 2 off a Mana Dork, and that last mode is incidentally very powerful in a format that is built around vehicles. You got a lot of these vehicles decks, you got Greasefang putting Parhelion into play, you got Rakdos playing Fable the Mirror Breaker, so there's actually a lot of artifacts and enchantments. Yes, 3 mana is a lot, so I think that this is kind of your fail-safe. When all else goes wrong, you have this here, but there are going to be times when this just absolutely saves you against a Parhelion coming back from the graveyard or whatever, which is something the rest of the cards in the Gruul Boats deck or the Gruul Vehicles deck just can't do. So again, Legendary, I think, makes it like a 1-of or a 2-of in that deck, but I see enough upside to play it in a deck like that. Crim, also Bard class. I think I've reached the point where I'm going to stop saying cards are good in Bard class, because like every Gruul Legend is good in Bard class. But Crim, what do you think about this one?
I don't like this at all.
Whew.
In Pioneer.
Okay.
Or maybe it has its applications, but like if its applications are, I think I like it in the Gruul Boats deck. I think you're right. Maybe it is decent there, but like my problem with is if you want to protect yourself from Greasefang and all that stuff, I wish it didn't make you pay 3 mana. Just remove the oil counters.
It is
like
everything
else
mana
can pay mana. It is an above the curve creature when you think about it, if you pay 2 mana and then you're now getting a 6/6, right? But it doesn't have trample. So there's plenty of little dorks running around. You can remove a total of 3 oil counters and spend 3 mana to give it Vigilance Menace until end of turn, and like I guess the +2/+2. But then you're just ending your whole turn, right? So it's a little bit awkward. I do like it out of the sideboard probably more than anything else. It's passable. I don't know. It just I just wish it didn't cost so much to activate all of its abilities, especially that last mode, because in Pioneer specific, if you're tapping out on turn 3, you're going to probably die because they always have the Cheese Fang.
Yeah, Cheese Fang always comes down on turn 3. All right, let's try this again then, Crim. Let's move on to number 7. We got another green 3-drop. Bloated Contaminator, also a 3-mana 4/4, actually kind of similar to MIGLOZ, except you don't got to spend any mana on anything. It just gets Trample, and it gets Toxic 1, and if it hits your opponent, it gets to Proliferate. How do you feel about this one in Pioneer and Explorer?
So I'm actually higher on this, even though it reads as 3 mana, it's a 2 mana card, because every deck that I'm thinking of this putting in always has the turn 1 elf.
Yeah.
So this is coming down on turn 2, and when it comes down on turn 2, this is an entirely different game plan, right? Like this card is a beater on turn 2. And yeah, maybe it is, you don't get the Mana Dork for some odd reason, because I swear I've never seen that happen though. Every green deck always has the Mana Dork on 1. So it doesn't have a ton of pips, so it's not like it's replacing the troll in mono green. Mono green is probably pretty hard set on that troll, but I'm talking mono green like aggro, anything that plays Mana Dorks. Obviously if like, you know, Naya Winoto were still around, this would be a cool 3-drop to play. I don't know. I think this is just going in all of the aggressive decks that can get this out as early as possible on turn 2, and it's just a solid body, but it's probably going in mono green aggro.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. I also really like this card. The pip issue, I think, keeps it from showing up in the mono green devotion deck, which is probably a good thing. That deck doesn't need to get any better. So I don't think it's beating out Old Growth Troll there. But if you're in some sort of like 2-color or even mono green aggro deck, I think this has a lot of upside, is doing something similar to Old Growth Troll, but actually being easier to cast, which outside of Nykthos is actually an upside. You usually don't want your things to have 3 pips. With Nykthos being the exception, this does a lot of the same things. We have a lot of good planeswalkers in the format, so the Proliferate could actually get value. Toxic, I don't know. I don't think that's really going to matter in Pioneer to any meaningful extent.
Whoa. Finn the Fangbearer heard what you said. All right.
Oh, that's like triple poison too, right? Because it has trample, and then it needs Death Touch. We got to give it Death Touch somehow.
Well, that'll be you'll be fine, right? Because as long as a creature you control with Death Touch, that's true. It doesn't need to give it Death Touch.
And
dang it.
It's cheap enough to Coco, which is nice. That's always another consideration for Explorer and Pioneer. So maybe there's some sort of, I don't know. We also have like Hardened Scales. That's an archetype that hasn't really fully taken off, but there's got to be some shell where this proliferate's going to be powerful. Like there's got to be some deck that is going to be able to take advantage of that, be it Planeswalkers, be it oil counters, be it +1/+1 counters. So I actually like this one too. I like MIGLOZ as well, but I think Bloated Contaminator is also a very good card. But let's move on to a really simple one. Ossification. Ossification, 2 mana, enchant a basic land you control. Gets rid of a planeswalker or a creature for as long as it's on the battlefield. This one is really, really simple and straightforward for me. So I think that the home for this is essentially the white decks. If you look at the white decks, kind of their go-to removal spell is Declaration in Stone. If you're a deck that's mostly basic lands, I think this is just an upgrade. Like, one thing I dislike about Declaration in Stone is giving your opponent a clue. We see the same issue with Fateful Absence in Standard. That actually is a kind of a big drawback. This obviously has the drawback that your opponent could kill it, which enchantment removal is not the biggest thing going on in Pioneer, so you're hopefully going to be safe. But I think that there's enough upside here in not giving your opponent a clue that if I'm playing like white aggro or angels or something like that, I think this becomes a pretty playable removal spell that I would play over Declaration in Stone. But Crim, what do you think? Where does this fit in the format?
I mean, I agree exactly with those points, just because it's a really good chain to the rocks, right? Like it's not 1 mana, right? But it's really good. And I mean, it's just solid removal, and any 2-color deck wants to play it that has a bunch of like basics, like you had mentioned. So yeah, like Angels right now, granted angel decks are using like Skyclave Apparition maybe as a way to Coco into it. You can't really Coco into this because it's not a creature. However, it's just a good out of the sideboard kind of card. It's so simple to just cast. It's not hard to do. The mono white humans deck would love this, like you had mentioned. So it's just going to replace those cards. What about you'll have Portable Hole and you'll have this.
What about Control Crib? I'm looking at some of the blue-white control lists. A lot of the blue-white control lists play like 2 main deck Fateful Absences. Is there any argument to replacing the Fateful Absences in control with this, or is being instant speed just like so important for control you'd rather give them a clue?
Yeah, I'd rather just give them a clue to have instant speed. On top of that, the control decks don't even play that many basics. They play like 6.
That is something to keep in mind, too, because when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is like a sweet Chain to the Rocks card in like Fires of Invention, 5-color Enigmatic Fires or whatever. But those decks just have like a single basic or something. So you really need to be like probably 2-color or even better, like mono white to really take advantage of it. If you're not playing like 10 or 12 basics, this is just going to be too inconsistent. If you're some deck that's playing like, I got 3 basics, you don't even want to consider this. You're going to be sadly disappointed.
Right, like you want to be able to reliably probably get this on board, let's just say maybe no later than turn 3.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You really want it to come down early. Well, let's keep moving on. Number 5 on our list, we got a very interesting card, MIRRAN Safehouse. So MIRRAN Safehouse, I think this is a card that goes in maybe exactly 1 deck, but in that 1 deck, it's probably going to be busted, and that 1 deck's already really good. Crim, what deck might want an artifact that can get the abilities of lands in graveyards?
Mono green. That's why it's on here. Mono green, you blow up the land with Field of Ruin or whatever, which is what I've been doing because I've been playing 4. I've been going up to like 7 Field of Ruins and like effects. And now they have an out where if you blow that stuff up, they just get to have this and have this be like a proxy of it, like a stand-in. They can get it with Karn. So like if they can keep one in the board. I do, however, like the fact that it's only miserable that mono green can use like Nykthos from the graveyard. However, it's really cool in like my mono black devotion like controlling deck, right? Because then I can get the Nykthos back, and it's fine there. It's just Nykthos in mono green is miserable.
The Karn part is what makes it miserable. Like that's what scares me about this card is like I don't even think mono green, I'm very sure they won't play it in the main deck, but this is just like, you play one in your sideboard, your Nykthos dies, you tutor this up with Karn, you got another Nykthos. Or maybe you legend rule yourself. Nykthos is legendary, so you legend rule yourself, and you're trying to have that huge turn where you make, 100 mana and do your thing. And then just as you're chaining all the stuff out of your sideboard, you grab this and get another Nykthos activation. So I think it's perfectly fine in like mono black devotion, mono white devotion, mono red devotion. But in the mono green devotion, I think this just takes a sideboard slot. I think this is in the card package, one of the cards that you're going to tutor up, and it's going to be super busted. And I don't know, maybe this pushes Karn over the edge. We've been talking about this since like Dominaria United, maybe adding more artifacts, or at least Brothers War. Like one of these sets is going to print the artifact that finally gets Karn banned. Maybe this is the one. Maybe the free Nykthos out of the sideboard is what puts it over the top finally.
I still think it's Nykthos. Because even with when that deck goes wild even without Karn, but this will definitely help it.
What about like you can't play Nykthos in decks that have forests? Maybe there's a way we can word the banning that we can still have fun with mono black devotion, but we don't have to worry about mono green.
That would be such a weird ban.
Let's keep moving on. Number 4 on our list. We got another green card, although this one I don't think is necessarily a Karn mono green devotion card. This is more of a nice efficient beater for an aggro deck, mono green 2-color, and that's CANKERBLOOM. So CANKERBLOOM has a lot of the same upsides as MIGLOZ, actually. 2-mana 3/2, so decent stats. You can sacrifice it, blow up an artifact, blow up an enchantment, or proliferate is a nice little bonus. So we've seen similar cards to this be pretty good. If you think about it, the Rex Sages, the Lorens, those are 3 mana to blow up artifact or enchantment. We have the, what's the werewolf Crim that's in standard right now? Whose name I'm forgetting?
I can't, something
Outland Liberator. Outland Liberator. It currently sees play in the sideboard of the green-red boats deck. This is way better because 3 power actually means it can crew Sky Sovereign. So I think that's like a strict upgrade to play this. And the other sneaky upside of this card is the proliferate mode, which someone pointed out to me, and I missed this at first, but it means you can just sack this at any time. Which, why would you want to just sack one of your creatures for no reason? Well, the answer is, if anyone tries to Bone Crusher Giant it, you can always just sack it even if there's no artifact or enchantment on the battlefield to fizzle the Bone Crusher so it doesn't go on an adventure. So basically, I think this is just a strict upgrade over the Werewolf, essentially. Like, if you're playing Outland Liberator, unless you're somehow Werewolf Tribal, I think you just play this instead. But what do you think, Crim?
I actually, so like what we had mentioned is that like MIGLOZ and stuff like that, it is at it's at a cost where it's kind of steep and requires you to like kind of keep up 3 mana to like remove the oil counters and do all that. CANKERBLOOM is only 2 mana to play itself normally.
Yep.
So it comes down early enough and it only costs 1. That is actually an acceptable rate. And as you had mentioned, it's got a very good body for a 2-drop. It's a solid just 3/2. Yeah, that's just solid. So it's nothing too fancy. It's just a good card though.
Yeah, I mean, so we've seen similar cards in the past. This is just one of the best versions of it. But let's keep moving on. Number 3 on our list. We go from 2 drops down to 1 drops for SKRELV Defector MITE, which is basically the Pioneer mom, as close as we get to Mother of Runes or Giver of Runes, but the Pioneer/Explorer version. Worse in basically every way. It can't block, it can't protect itself, you gotta spend mana or some life to actually activate it, but we don't have Mother of Runes in Pioneer, we don't have Giver of Runes in Pioneer, and those are really powerful cards. I think this just kind of fills the same role, like not quite as good, but that's fine. Pioneer is not quite as strong as Modern or Legacy. So Grim, what do you think about SKRELV? Is this our Pioneer mom, essentially?
It is, yeah. It's just pretty much like Explorer Pioneer mom, and like this is gonna just do what like I like it. I think I like it. I like the option to have that, and it allows you to maybe try auras and things like that, and maybe even the kind of like the Infects play style in Modern, but take that to Pioneer or like Explorer.
I'm super curious to see how good this is. Like, if you think about it, like, would Greasefang play this? Because if you think about like Giver of Runes in Modern, that's a card Hammer Time really likes, and you protect your payoff that's getting the hammer. I could see like turn 1 you play this in your Greasefang deck, either your opponent has to spend a removal spell to kill this, or the turn you play Greasefang, you're like, whatever, give it hexproof, get back my Parhelion, kill you. So I think if you're trying to protect one specific piece like that, that this is probably a pretty good option. So I could see Greasefang adopting this, and I think you can just play it in Coco decks, you can play it in white aggro decks, anything like that, where you're just like kind of forcing through damage, you can't be blocked by a creature of a color, you're preventing removal spells. It seems just like a really good card overall. Yeah.
I mean, again, like Greasefang may need to figure out what it's going to cut or whatever, but it's really solid in that kind of deck. I like that.
Or you mentioned auras, like if you're trying to light pause and SRAM people, like another really good protection spell in a deck like that, because you're not going to make your auras fall off, which is actually kind of a weird upside compared to Giver of Runes or Mother of Runes, so it's not all downside with the Might Mom.
And the Phyrexian mana cost is nice. The Phyrexian mana cost is nice, so you don't have to leave up mana for it. You could just take 2.
And maybe sometimes poison your opponent out of the game by getting in 10 times with it.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
All right, let's move on. Number 2 on our list. Speaking of Greasefangs, speaking of Nykthoses, actually, I guess Nykthoses doesn't actually matter here, does it? Well, we have a new hate card in Soulless Jailer. Soulless Jailer, 2 mana, 0/4 permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. I was thinking this hit on the 6 mana sorcery that puts all the permanents into play, but it actually doesn't. It doesn't stop that. Crim, what does this stop in the Pioneer format?
I mean, permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. The biggest thing is like, you don't have to see
Parhelion. Yes, no Parhelions, thankfully.
But then there's players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile as well. So, whereas normally before you would probably see something like this is a weird spot because Dampening Sphere, Weathered Runestone exists, and it allows you to still cast, like, it allows the opponent though to still cast the Storm the Festival. Yeah. Right? But this one wouldn't allow them to cast this Storm that.
They can't flash it back, right? So it does, I guess, slightly hit on Mono Green Devotion, because they can't flash back Storm the Festival. They can cast it the first time still.
Yeah, it gets the backside of it and all the flashback stuff. So I like that. And these things, I wish, like, normally when you play these things, you take the turn off. But you are now able to at least have a little bit of a body to block. But because it's also on a body, it's potentially fragile. So I don't know. This card is good at stopping what you want it to stop, but it is way more fragile than like a Weathered Runestone.
That's the most interesting part of this card for me, honestly, is usually when we see this style of effect, it's on a non-creature artifact. So, as you said, non-creature artifacts usually harder to kill. This is going to die to like a Fatal Push or something. But there's some upside here. There's actually some upside with being a creature. For one thing, a 0/4 actually kind of blocks pretty well against aggro decks. If you run into some sort of like mono red deck or something, this is actually going to stop most of their threats. The other thing I like about this card, and the biggest upside by far being a creature, is you can get it with Collected Company, or you can get it with a Court of Calling. You can get it with these creature tutor effects, which you're definitely not going to find. So I think that's another nice upside. I think I'm curious if it hits on enough. Like, would you put this in your sideboard today? I think this is definitely one of those cards that, like, you got to keep in mind because it hates on certain things. And when the meta's in that place, this is going to be one of your best sideboard cards and most important cards. Does this deserve sideboard slots in our current Pioneer meta? If you think about it, like, we hate on Greasefang, we hit a little bit on Nykthos. What else are we hating on in the current meta that this is going to shut down?
I mean, when I think about it, like, it's really just those, right? Because that's what we're like, this card's really there for. I mean, we already have stuff against it, but it's nice to have different forms, like different ways of like stopping the hate or stopping their game plan. And so this is a solid way to just shut that down. Otherwise, I mean, I don't think there's randomly a Storm deck. So like that's using anything from the graveyard. I wish it stopped things from entering from the library. That was the only thing that I found problematic about it.
I was kind of wondering that too. I guess. Oh, it does actually. No, it does stop Emergent Ultimatum as well because you're casting those cards from exile, right? So it hits on, so it does hit on Hidden Stirrings, which doesn't matter for Explorer, but Hidden Stirrings is like one of the best decks in Pioneer proper right now. It's like a top tier deck. So that actually I think might make it enough. The other thing I like about it,
doesn't it stop Indomitable Creativity? Does Indomitable Creativity? No, it just puts it into play.
Indomitable Creativity, I think, somehow gets around like every hate card for some reason. Just the way I just assume nothing ever stops it. I just die to it every time. The other thing I think is sneaky about this design is I feel like this is a really good best of one hate card for Explorer on Arena. It's hard to play a Damping Sphere in the main deck of your best of one deck. At least this has a body. You can put an aura on it. You can block with it. So I feel like this is a kind of in some ways designed for best of one play as a card that's going to hate on. We've heard people complaining nonstop about like Greasefang and best of one, just like how much people hate playing against that deck. This is going to shut down the Greasefang deck. It comes down early enough to do it, and you don't have to play a do nothing artifact. You actually get a body, so it does something at least against an aggro deck. You got a blocker out there. It does something in these other matchups. So I think that's another really sneaky upside for Arena and best of one in specific. Anyway, let's move on. Number 1 on our list, we got a boring choice, but it is the correct choice. At the top of our list for Pioneer, we have a land cycle, a reprint land cycle, but this is the first time these Fastlands have been legal in the Pioneer format. Crim, what do you think about the Allied Fastlands finally, after quite a long wait, making it to Pioneer?
Yeah, it's been so long. We've been asking for these for like years now. And the main one that's going to be like most important, surprisingly isn't the one on here, is Blackcleave Cliffs, right? Yeah. Blackcleave Cliffs is going to go right into black-red. You've got Razorverge Thicket for all the angel decks and stuff like that. So, I don't know, this land base smooths out a lot of the mana bases for so many of the decks that are trying to do, like the control deck probably isn't going to play Seachrome Coast, right? But all the decks that want to curve out early and like get there, like get stuff set up before, like by no later than turn 3, this mana base really helps them. And Rakdos midrange can like really profit off this. And yeah, it's nice to have these. It's just they're a really good mana base or mana piece that we've been missing.
Yeah, finally, the days of like green-red boats having to play Mana Confluence or whatever, I think is finally over now that we have Copperline Gorge. Rakdos' mana base gets better. If you really think about it, like we have the other half of this cycle. It's been in Pioneer since the format's inception, the enemy versions, and those are very heavily played. If you're gonna like rank the dual land cycles in Pioneer and Explorer in specific, I think it's Shocklands number 1. And then it's probably Pathways number 2. And then I think it's Fastlands number 3. So this is a cycle that we're going to see in a lot of decks. You're going to see these cards showing up all over the place. Blue-White Spirits is going to love having access to the Seachrome Coast. So many decks are going to be influenced by this change. Crim, how much does the aggro versus control thing matter? Like, if you're playing Azorius Control, do you play any copies of Seachrome Coast, or does the fact that it is going to come into play tap later in the game just too punishing for a deck that's trying to go long?
Yeah, it's too punishing because you have an increase in lands in your deck. So at that point, if I'm going to play a land that most likely will be tapped, I'd rather just play like Irrigated Farmland, right? It counts as a land type. It turns on my Glacial Fortresses and maybe like a Drowned Catacomb, whatever, right? And it can cycle itself, much like the Triomes can. So I would probably start looking somewhere there before I start adding these into those decks. However, if I'm looking to curve out early, like in Darkslick Shores, there's a Dimir like mid-rangey kind of Dimir tempo deck that like gets played a little bit in Pioneer that'll slot right in there because you want to set up early. And this gives you all the mana, and like it gives you all the fixing that you could ask for. It also means that it's now coming to Arena, which allows me to play with these in Historic as well. So I'm really excited just for this cycle to hit Arena because, yeah, I've been wanting to play with them, and it does a lot for Pioneer just to smooth out the early, like, more tempo-y decks and things that care about, setting up, as I had mentioned.
Yeah, and it's super nice that they always make both colors of mana. It's very important for decks that, especially like 2-color aggro decks, they have 1-drops of each color. Pathways Yeah, they let you play one or the other, but you end up having issues in the late game. These lands, they give you both the colors on turn 1, and then they're a real dual land for the rest of the game. So I'm not saying these like replace pathways in all decks. We're going to see these alongside pathways, but expect this to be a top tier land cycle that you're going to see in a lot of decks. Maybe not the slowest control decks, but all stars and aggro decks, and very good in mid-range decks as well too. We see like Jund mid-range and decks like that in Modern taking advantage of these lands. The same thing will be true like Rakdos. We'll certainly be playing these in Pioneer and really getting a lot of value out of having access to these lands. So very good land cycle that should have a nice impact and nice little upgrade for Magic Arena as well, in Explorer, also in Historic and everywhere. So I'm glad they brought them back. It's been a decade. It was time to finally get this land cycle back, and a nice little financial reprint too, because some of these were creeping up to like $15-20, and this will hopefully get the price down a little bit so players can play with them. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 Pioneer/Explorer cards from Phyrexia All Will Be One. Crim, thanks for hanging out and discussing it. Always fun.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for watching. So you've seen our top 10 cards. Let us know what you think. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What are you most hyped to play with in Pioneer or in Explorer on Magic Arena from Phyrexia All Will Be One? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you want even more Phyrexia stuff, don't worry. Both Crim and I can have a ton of gameplay across formats, playing with all these new cards, going up on the YouTube shortly. So keep an eye out for that in the next few days. And Crim, if people want to catch you watching, streaming some of these cards, where can they find you doing that?
Of course, you could always go to my handle, The Asian Avenger, on Twitch, and of course, all the content I put out on MTG Goldfish. So
awesome. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk to you soon.